They erased me, my own family. One lie was all it took. 10 years gone, my life, my future, everything. Now, they want forgiveness. But some wounds don't heal. Some betrayals don't fade. So tell me, if you were me, what would you do? I don't think I ever stood a chance. Not against Alicia. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Me? I worked hard, got good grades, stayed out of trouble. But it never seemed to matter. If she got a B, it was celebrated. If I got an A, it was expected. Every dinner, every holiday, every casual conversation turned into a highlight reel of her achievements. I used to think that maybe if I did just a little more, they'd finally see me. But the truth? They weren't looking. It wasn't just favoritism. It was erasure. Birthdays forgotten, accomplishments brushed aside, and every mistake magnified. I remember one Christmas when I won an academic competition. I was so proud. I thought, this is it. This is my moment. But before I could even show them my award, Alicia announced she'd been picked for a minor role in a school play. That was it. That was the headline. My achievement became background noise. I laughed it off, but something cracked inside me. That day I started keeping score, counting every time she was praised and I was ignored. It wasn't bitterness, it was survival. I wanted to understand why I was invisible. But the more I noticed, the worse it got. Even when I tried to pull away, I couldn't escape it. At family gatherings, friends and relatives would gush about her. "Your parents must be so proud," they'd say. And I'd just nod, swallowing the truth, pretending it didn't hurt. Then came Thanksgiving. The night everything changed. For the first time in my life, I was the center of attention. People congratulated me, asked about my future. My parents even smiled at me with something that almost felt like pride. And Alicia? She was quiet. Uncharacteristically so. I should have known. I should have seen it coming. Because when Alicia isn't the star, she doesn't fade into the background. She rewrites the script. The next morning, everything felt off. My parents wouldn't look at me. My mom was pacing, eyes red and swollen, while my dad sat stiffly at the table, fingers drumming against his coffee mug. Then Alicia walked in, calm, composed, like she had rehearsed this 100 times. And she said it. One sentence, one lie, and just like that, my entire life collapsed. I laughed at first, not because it was funny, but because it was impossible. There's no way they'll believe this. They know me. They know I would never, but their faces told me otherwise. No hesitation, no questions, just disgust. My mom covered her mouth, like she was about to be sick. My dad stood up so fast his chair nearly toppled over. "Get out," he said, voice cold, final. My heart stopped. What? There was no trial, no defense, no chance to explain, just their verdict, swift and absolute. Alicia stood there, silent, watching as they tore me apart. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just let them do the work for her. I begged. I swore on everything I had ever loved. But their minds were made up. By the time the sun had set, I was gone, erased, just like I'd always been. Only this time, it was permanent. As I stood outside, suitcase in hand, staring at the house I grew up in, I kept waiting for the door to swing open, for someone to realize the mistake, for my mother to come running, but nothing happened. The curtain shifted slightly in Alicia's window and I knew she was watching. She won. And I lost everything. But I didn't even know how much more there was left to lose. It wasn't just my family. That was the real punch to the gut. The people who were supposed to know me, really know me. My girlfriend, my best friend, my so-called support system, they didn't even hesitate. One by one, they disappeared. Some sent a text, a weak, "I'm sorry, but I can't be involved in this." Others didn't say anything at all. Just silence. As if I had never existed. I tried to fight it at first. I called. I showed up at their doors, I pleaded. You know me. You know I wouldn't do this. But I saw it in their eyes, that flicker of doubt, the hesitation before they spoke. They were afraid to be associated with me. And that hurt more than the betrayal itself. Because if even they didn't believe me, who would? Days turned into weeks. My phone stopped buzzing. My inbox stayed empty. I moved from couch to couch until even those doors started closing. Eventually, I just stopped trying. I walked through the city, invisible, numb. The world kept spinning, people laughed, lived, moved forward, and I was stuck in this slow-motion nightmare, watching everything I built, everything I was, disintegrate right in front of me. I started to wonder, if I disappeared completely, would anyone even notice? That thought scared me, not because of what it meant, but because I wasn't sure if I cared anymore. And when you get to that point, when nothing feels real, when every day feels like an echo of the last, you start looking for a way out, any way out. And for me, that came in the form of a uniform, a contract, and a war zone halfway across the world. War wasn't the plan. But then again, I didn't have a plan. I walked into that recruitment office with nothing, no home, no family, no future. The recruiter took one look at me and knew. He'd seen guys like me before, the ones running from something, not to something. But he didn't ask questions. He just slid the papers across the desk, and I signed without thinking twice. If I was going to disappear, I might as well do it somewhere far away. Boot camp was hell, but at least it was a different kind of hell. It gave me structure, rules, a reason to wake up. And for the first time in a long time, nobody cared about my past. They cared if I could run, shoot, follow orders. Simple, clean. No emotions, no betrayal, just survival. And that I could do. So when they sent me to the front lines, I didn't hesitate. I volunteered for the worst missions, the ones nobody wanted. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just didn't care if I came back. Afghanistan, Iraq, it all blurred together. Dust, sweat, gunfire, the constant hum of danger. But the thing about war is, it makes everything else seem small. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the loneliness, it all faded into background noise. There was no past, no future, just the next mission, the next step. I should have died a dozen times over. I almost wanted to. But fate, or luck, or some cruel joke kept me breathing. And then one day, it was over. Honorably discharged. A handful of medals I didn't care about. A return ticket to a life I no longer had. I stood at the airport, duffel bag in hand, staring at a world that had moved on without me. And then I saw it. An envelope with my parents' names on it. My hands shook as I opened it. The words blurred, but the message was clear. Alicia, confessed. I must have read that letter a dozen times, but the words didn't change. Alicia confessed. After all these years, after all the damage, she just admitted it. My parents, the same people who threw me away without hesitation, suddenly wanted to talk. They wrote about regret, about missing me, about wanting to make things right. And the worst part? A tiny, pathetic part of me wanted to believe them. But the letter wasn't an apology. It was an explanation. Alicia hadn't confessed out of guilt. No, her husband had pressured her. She only told the truth because she had something to lose. And just like that, it all made sense. She didn't regret what she did. She regretted getting caught. My parents? They weren't reaching out because they loved me. They were reaching out because now it was convenient. I laughed. Not out of joy, not even out of anger. Just disbelief. A decade of suffering. A decade of being alone. And they thought a few paragraphs on a piece of paper could fix it? I pictured my mom crying as she wrote it. My dad struggling to find the right words. Did they ever think about what happened to me? Did they ever wonder if I was even alive? Or was this just another chapter in Alicia's story? I had dreamed of this moment for years. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't the villain they made me out to be. But standing there, letter in hand, I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt hollow. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure what to do next. For years, I told myself that if this day ever came, I'd go home. I'd hear them out. I'd forgive. Maybe even start over. But now that it was real, I felt nothing but anger. How do you forgive people who never fought for you? Who let you rot in exile until it was convenient to bring you back? They wanted closure. But what about me? What about everything I lost? I tried to imagine it. Walking through that front door, sitting across from them at the dinner table, pretending like the past decade never happened. Would they expect me to smile? To hug Alicia? To act like I wasn't gutted by what she did? I could already hear the excuses, the justifications. We were scared. We didn't know what to do. We thought we were protecting her, as if any of that erased the hell they put me through. But the worst part? Alicia had moved on. She had a husband, a career, a life. She got to live normally while I spent years punishing myself for something I didn't do. And now, they wanted me to let it go? Just like that? The thought made my stomach turn. The idea of her getting a second chance while I had to rebuild from nothing felt like a joke I wasn't in on. I stared at the letter for hours, flipping it over in my hands, searching for something, anything that would make this decision easier. But there was no easy answer. I could go back, let them have their closure. Or I could walk away forever and let them live with the hole they dug. Either way, someone would lose. And for once, it didn't have to be me. Before I could decide, life decided for me. Val called, voice shaking, words barely making sense. She's gone. At first, I thought I misheard. Then it hit me. Michelle, his little girl, his world. I gripped the phone, waiting for him to say it was a mistake, a bad dream. But it was real. She was gone. And just like that, my own problems felt small. I flew out the next morning. Val had been my only real family for years. When everyone else turned their backs, he stayed. He never asked for explanations, never doubted me. Now, he needed me. Walking into his house, seeing his wife clutching an empty stuffed animal, hearing the silence where a child's laughter used to be, I felt something crack inside me. I knew loss, but this was different. The funeral was a blur of grief and disbelief. People whispered about how unfair it was, how no parent should have to bury their child. And I thought about my own parents, about the hole I left in their lives, whether they ever mourned me like this. Death changes things. It forces you to see what matters. Standing by Val, watching him try to hold himself together, I realized something. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. As the service ended, I made my decision. I wasn't going back to my family to forgive or to forget. I was going back because I needed to end this, to close the door properly, one way or another. Christmas was coming, and for the first time in years, I was going home. The house looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I had just grown too much. I stood outside, duffel bag in hand, heart pounding in a way war never made it. Through the window, I saw them. My parents, my cousins, even Alicia, laughing, drinking, like nothing had ever happened. For a second, I almost turned around. But I didn't come here for them. I came to see for myself if there was anything left worth saving. When I stepped inside, the room went silent. Forks scraped against plates, glasses froze mid-air. My mother's eyes filled with tears. My father stood, clearing his throat like he was about to give a speech. Alicia just stared. The only person who moved toward me was my cousin's wife, one of the few who never cut me off. She hugged me first. That small act of warmth kept me from walking right back out. I handed out gifts, not because I wanted to play nice, but because it gave me something to do with my hands. I watched my father struggle to find words, my mother holding back sobs, Alicia avoiding my gaze. It felt fake, like they wanted to pretend the last 10 years hadn't happened. But I remembered every Second of it, every holiday alone. Every night wondering why wasn't I enough. I kept my distance, observing, listening. They talked about their lives, their jobs, their kids, like I was just some long-lost relative, not the son they'd abandoned. The only person who didn't act like nothing happened, Alicia's husband. He never once looked at me with pity, just quiet respect. And that was the first moment I felt like maybe not everyone in this house had been my enemy. She found me alone in the kitchen, away from the forced holiday cheer. I heard her footsteps before I saw her, slow, hesitant, like she was afraid I'd vanish if she moved too fast. "Chris," she said, voice softer than I remembered. I didn't respond. I just waited. If she had something to say, she'd have to work for it. "I'm sorry." The words came quickly, like she was afraid she'd choke on them. "For everything." I finally turned to face her. She looked different, older, guilt carved into the lines of her face. But guilt wasn't enough. Not after what she'd done. She went on, saying how she never meant for things to go that far, how she was young, scared, selfish. She thanked me for not telling our parents everything, as if that made it better. She wanted forgiveness, closure, maybe even redemption. But all I could think about was the years I spent alone, the nights I wished I didn't exist. Her regret didn't erase my suffering. "You got to live," I said, finally breaking my silence. "You got to move on." And I got... what, exactly? She had no answer, just teary eyes and a trembling lip, waiting for me to absolve her. But forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's not something you just give because someone finally decides they want it. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to forgive her, but I did know one thing. This wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. Forgiveness never came. Not that night, not in the days that followed. Instead, something colder settled inside me. A realization. They wanted things to go back to normal, for me to slip back into my old place like a missing puzzle piece. But I wasn't that person anymore. And if they thought I'd let them walk away with nothing but guilt, they were wrong. I spent the next few months planning, quietly, carefully, every move calculated. I played the part, civil, distant, but not angry enough to raise suspicion. I let them think I was healing, that maybe with time, we'd be a family again. They never saw it coming, not when the fire consumed the house in the dead of night, not when Alicia barely made it out, coughing, burned, broken, not when her daughter was gone, vanished without a trace. I made sure she never found her. I gave my niece a life away from the shadows of my sister's lies, a chance at something better. And when the authorities finally caught up to me, when I stood in that courtroom listening to my sentence, I felt no fear, no regret, just satisfaction, because Alicia would spend the rest of her life searching, hurting, losing, just like I had. Some might call it revenge. I call it balance. And as I sit here, locked away, I wonder, does she think of me every day the way I once thought of her? Does she wake up with the same ache in her chest, the same emptiness? I hope so. Because now she knows what it feels like. And that is justice.
Keep watching our stories by clicking on one of the videos that appear on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be alerted about new videos. See you next time.